I never thought a simple request for money would unravel everything between us, but there I stood, the woman I raised, now accusing me of being selfish. As I stand here looking at the navy blue dress hanging in my closet, memories flood back, memories of better times. This dress isn't just fabric, it's a symbol of moments I held close to my heart. I wore it for Emma's high school graduation, the pride in her eyes when she walked across that stage. Then again for her college completion when she stood tall, ready to take on the world. And later to celebrate her first promotion at the marketing firm, a moment that felt like the culmination of all those late nights I stayed up worrying about her future, supporting her dreams. Each time I wore this dress, she would compliment me, telling me how beautiful I looked, how proud she was to have me as her mother. It felt like the perfect picture of what a mother-daughter relationship should be, filled with love, respect, and mutual admiration. But now as I trace my fingers over the fabric, smoothing it over my 62-year-old frame, I wonder if this will be the last time I ever wear it for Emma. Things have changed. 3 weeks ago, everything shifted after that explosive argument. Emma, my daughter, the little girl I once held in my arms, demanded that I contribute $60,000 to her wedding. Not ask, but demand, as if it were her right. I tried to explain to her that the money I had saved was for my retirement, that it was all I had left after Harold passed. I offered her $15,000, a sum that could still make for a beautiful, meaningful ceremony, but she rejected it. "Mom, you're being selfish," she said, her words cutting deeper than I ever imagined. I felt like a stranger, as if the daughter I once knew had disappeared, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. This dress, it's now a reminder of everything we've lost, and I'm not sure where we go from here. I never imagined that a simple conversation about a wedding budget could unravel so much between us. When Emma first brought it up, I thought it was just another one of those grand ideas she had in her mind, a fleeting dream that would fade away once she saw how unreasonable it was. But this time I was wrong. She was so excited when she called me that day. Her voice, usually warm and light, was brimming with enthusiasm, almost as if this conversation was a formality. I had no idea how heavy it would become. She started talking about her wedding, how she and Greg had found the perfect venue, the ideal photographer, and the designer dress she'd fallen in love with. She sounded like the young woman I once knew, full of life and plans, unaware of the weight that money would bring into the equation. And then she dropped it. "Mom, I need $60,000 for the wedding." I couldn't have heard her right. I thought I misheard. What I asked, my voice quiet, barely above a whisper, unsure if I was truly understanding what she was saying. $60,000, she repeated without hesitation, as if the sum was as reasonable as paying for groceries. My heart sank. I felt an overwhelming tightness in my chest, a panic I couldn't shake off. I had worked hard all my life, saved every penny after Harold's death, to ensure I could retire with dignity, not needing to rely on anyone. This money wasn't just a number in a bank account. It was my safety net, my peace of mind. To hear her treat it like a transaction, a mere expectation, was like a slap in the face. I asked her to explain. I needed to understand. Was this what she truly needed for her happiness? She spoke about the wedding being a once-in-a-lifetime event, about wanting it to be perfect, about wanting to start her life with Greg on the right foot. But there was no mention of the significance of what this money actually represented, the stability, the future, my independence. "Don't you want me to be happy, Mom?" she asked, her voice edged with frustration. I was taken aback. "Of course I want you to be happy, Emma. But happiness doesn't come from throwing a lavish celebration. Happiness is about the memories you make, the love you share, not the price tag attached to everything." She didn't understand. She couldn't see past her dream wedding, the idea of a perfect day, that would be Instagram-worthy one that everyone would envy. My explanation about financial realities, about my ability to contribute only $15,000, fell on deaf ears. To her, it wasn't about what was reasonable, it was about what she believed she deserved. I couldn't believe the way she looked at me, like I was some cold-hearted person who just wanted to hoard money. "Mom, "You're being selfish," she said. The words stung in a way that nothing else had in our relationship. It wasn't just about the wedding, it was about something deeper, something unspoken between us. It was as if I had failed her as a mother, as if all the love I had poured into raising her didn't matter, because I couldn't give her what she wanted in that moment. I offered what I could. I didn't think $15,000 was unreasonable. It was still a generous sum enough for a beautiful local wedding, one that wouldn't break the bank. But she scoffed at my offer, turning away from it like it was an insult. "It's not enough, Mom. You don't understand." And I didn't. I didn't understand how my daughter, the little girl who once brought me dandelions and called them sunshine flowers, had transformed into this person who saw everything in terms of what I could provide, what I owed her. There was no gratitude, no acknowledgement of what I had already done for her. There was only an expectation that I would give, without any understanding of the cost, not just in money, but in the emotional toll it was taking on me. The argument escalated from there. Words were thrown like daggers, sharp and unforgiving. Emma told me I didn't care about her happiness, that I was holding her back. I told her that love wasn't about buying her happiness, it was about giving her the tools to build it on her own. But the gap between us kept widening until there was nothing left but silence. She left, slamming the door behind her, and I was left standing there, my hands shaking, my mind racing. What had just happened? How had we gone from the mother and daughter who shared everything, laughed together, supported one another, to two people who couldn't even agree on something as simple as a wedding budget? In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest. I tried to call her, tried to smooth things over, but the calls went unanswered. She blocked me on social media, and every attempt to reach out was met with silence. I felt the distance growing, an emotional chasm widening between us. I had never felt so alone. The weeks dragged on, and with each passing day, the weight of what had transpired settled deeper into my bones. My thoughts kept circling back to Emma's face that day, her eyes filled with contempt, her voice laced with accusations. I couldn't shake the image of her standing there, the little girl I had once held in my arms, now replaced by a woman I didn't recognize, a woman who had turned her back on everything I had taught her, everything I had sacrificed for her. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the way she had looked at me, the way she had questioned my love, my choices, my very identity as her mother. It was about the realization that somewhere along the way, we had drifted apart, and no amount of money, no amount of explanation would ever be enough to bridge that gap. I spent my days in a daze wondering where I had gone wrong, what I could have done differently. But the truth was, I couldn't fix it. Not this time. And for the first time, I wondered if the relationship we had built over so many years could ever be repaired. It was the hardest thing I had ever faced, the idea that the woman I loved, the woman I had dedicated my life to, was now someone who saw me only as a resource. The weight of that reality was crushing, and in that moment, I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to survive it. But I had no choice but to keep moving forward. I remember the phone call like it happened yesterday. It came on a Tuesday morning, the sun already high in the sky, and I was out in the small garden behind the duplex. The flowers were blooming, a small comfort, after months of emotional strain, and I was trying my best to clear my mind and focus on something simple, something that wasn't tied to the disaster that had become my relationship with Emma. When the phone rang, I didn't expect it to be her. I had given up on hoping she'd reach out. For weeks I had been swallowed by silence, unsure of how to bridge the chasm that had opened between us after that fight. But there it was, her name flashing on the screen. I hesitated for a moment. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail like all the other attempts at communication that had ended with her ghosting me. But something in my gut told me I had to take it. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Mom, it's me, Emma." Her voice was different, softer. It didn't carry the same sharpness, the same cold distance that had marked our last conversation. There was vulnerability there now, a tone I hadn't heard in weeks. I could hear the hesitation in her words, as if she was unsure whether she had the right to ask unsure if I would even care enough to listen. And that hit me harder than I expected. My heart ached at the thought that we had reached this point. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what happened," she continued, her voice trembling just slightly. "Maybe we've both been too stubborn. I'd really like to talk. Maybe over dinner I want to try and work this out." There it was, the lifeline I had been waiting for. I felt a rush of hope mixed with caution. Maybe Emma was beginning to understand. Maybe this pregnancy, this new life growing inside her, had given her the perspective she needed. Maybe it had awakened a part of her that valued family over everything else. "I'd like that too, sweetheart," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Where do you want to meet Emma?" suggested Franco's, a little Italian bistro on Meridian Street that Harold and I had loved. It had been our go-to spot for anniversaries, for quiet moments when we didn't need to say much, but could just enjoy each other's company. It had been years since I'd been there, but the thought of going back gave me a sense of familiarity, of warmth. It felt like the right place to reconnect, to heal whatever rift had grown between us. The evening of the dinner, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, smoothing the navy blue dress over my frame. I hadn't worn it in months, but tonight felt different. Tonight, I wasn't just going to wear it for the memories. It felt like I might wear it to a new beginning. Maybe we were going to heal. Maybe Emma had realized the value of what we had. I put on my lipstick with a steady hand, trying to ignore the flutter of nerves in my stomach. I was trying to be optimistic, trying to believe in the possibility of reconciliation, but I knew deep down that nothing was going to be easy. The damage had been done. I had been hurt. But perhaps this dinner would offer the space we both needed to rebuild what was broken. Driving to Franco's, I passed the familiar landmarks, the elementary school where I had volunteered in the library, the park where I used to push Emma on the swings. I had spent so many years in this neighborhood, so many moments shared with Emma, creating memories that now seemed so far away. But as I drove past those places, I didn't feel resentment or anger. Instead, I felt a quiet sadness, a longing for the connection we used to share. Franco's was just as I remembered it, charming with its brick facade, the window boxes overflowing with flowers, and the soft glow of candlelight visible through the gauze curtains. As I stepped inside, I was immediately greeted by the hostess, a young woman with kind eyes who led me to a corner table. And there she was, Emma already seated, looking more radiant than I had seen her in months. She was glowing in that way that only pregnant women can be. Her dark hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and her skin seemed to shine with a softness I hadn't seen in years. For a moment, I forgot the pain and the anger. I saw my daughter again, the girl who used to hold my hand and tell me everything would be okay. "Mom," she said, standing up to embrace me. Her perfume was familiar, comforting, and for a moment I felt the familiar surge of maternal love, the love that had defined me for 34 years. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I meant it. Despite everything, I still loved her. She was still my daughter. "How are you feeling?" I asked, trying to find some common ground. "Any morning sickness?" She touched her belly, her hand resting protectively over it. "Better now. The second trimester is supposed to be easier." For a moment, we talked about her pregnancy, about the little details that came with it. She seemed more relaxed, less guarded. But just as I thought we might have found our way back to each other, everything shifted. Just as we were about to settle in, the door opened, and in walked Greg. And behind him were two men, both dressed in dark suits, carrying briefcases. They moved like they were part of the plan, part of the evening's agenda. My heart dropped into my stomach. What was happening? Greg flashed his usual bright, practiced smile as he approached the table. "Mrs. McKinney," he said, his tone dripping with faux politeness. "Thank you for joining us." The men took seats around the table, and for a moment I felt as if the walls were closing in. What had started as an intimate dinner with my daughter had suddenly turned into something else entirely, something I couldn't quite place, but I knew wasn't right. I looked at Emma, who was sitting quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She wouldn't meet my eyes. My heart ached as I realized she was complicit in this. She had brought me here under false pretenses, hoping I would be distracted by the warmth of the meal, by the familiarity of Franco's. But this wasn't a reconciliation dinner. It was a setup. Mom Emma finally said, her voice steady, but avoiding my gaze. "These are some colleagues of Greg's. They have some paperwork they'd like you to look at." My pulse quickened. I could feel the coldness of the room settling in. The men didn't look like they were here to discuss wedding details or family matters. They looked like they were here for business. The kind of business that had nothing to do with family and everything to do with control. Before I could say anything, one of the men leaned forward. His silver hair and sharp smile made me uneasy. "Mrs. McKinney," he began, his tone professional but cold. "I'm Richard Kirk Gregg's attorney. We've prepared some documents that we believe will be beneficial for everyone involved." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. My stomach twisted, and I knew deep down that this was not a dinner to mend old wounds. It was a power play. I opened my mouth to ask what kind of documents, but the answer already loomed in front of me. Gregg cleared his throat, then spoke with that smooth, practiced charm of his. "It's really quite simple, Mrs. McKinney," he said, his voice condescending. "We're asking you to sign a power of attorney that would allow us to manage your financial affairs." I froze. The shock hit me like a punch to the gut. Was he serious? "We're just concerned," he continued, his tone dripping with false concern about your age and the fact that you're living alone now. It just makes sense for someone younger to take over managing your investments, your property, your decisions. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I stared at him speechless, trying to process it. Was this really happening? Were they really trying to take control of my life? Of everything Harold and I had worked so hard to build. "Gregg, I'm 62, not 92. I said, my voice tight with anger. He shrugged as if it was a minor inconvenience. "Of course, Mrs. McKinney, but you have to admit these things are complex. Real estate markets, investment portfolios. It's not something you should have to worry about." I looked at Emma, waiting for some sign that this wasn't her idea, that she wasn't complicit in this. But she sat there silent, her gaze fixed on the table. This was it. This was the betrayal I had feared. They weren't just after my money. They were trying to strip me of my dignity, to take away my agency, to make me feel small and powerless. "Let me get this straight," I said, trying to hold on to my composure. "You want me to sign over my financial decisions to you, to Gregg." Just like that, Emma finally looked up, her eyes, cold and calculating. "If you don't sign, Mom," she said, her voice as flat as I had ever heard it, "then you won't see your grandson grow up." The words hit me like a slap across the face. She was using my grandchild to manipulate me. She was threatening to keep him away from me if I didn't comply with their demands. I felt the cold weight of betrayal settle in my chest. This wasn't my daughter sitting across from me. This wasn't the girl I had raised. This was someone else, someone who had been twisted by greed and manipulation. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking, but my resolve hardening. "I won't sign," I said, my voice steady, despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. "And you can tell Gregg that if he ever tries to pull something like this again, I'll make sure he regrets it." The table was silent. Emma didn't say a word. Gregg and the lawyers exchanged uncomfortable glances, and as I turned and walked out of that bistro, I knew I had made the right decision. But I also knew that the road ahead would be long, painful, and filled with more betrayal than I could ever have imagined. As I stood there, my fingers gripping the back of the chair, I knew deep in my bones that I could not sign that document. I would not be coerced into handing over my life savings, my future, and my dignity, just because Gregg and Emma thought they could push me around. My hands shook, but I clenched my fists to steady myself. I looked at Emma, at the daughter I had raised, the little girl, who once clung to my side, who once asked for my advice, and now she sat there silent as if everything was justified. She didn't say a word, just looked at me with cold eyes. I wasn't sure if she was ashamed or if she truly believed she was right. Either way, her silence spoke louder than anything she could say. Greg's expression didn't change. That practiced smile of his never faltered, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He was starting to feel the pressure. He knew that what he was asking for wasn't just an overstep, it was a complete invasion of my rights. I turned my attention back to the lawyers, the men in suits who had been so quick to pounce on the opportunity to manage my finances. They exchanged glances, unsure of how to proceed now that I had refused. Mrs. McKinney, Richard Kirk Gregg's attorney, said with that sickeningly polite tone, "Perhaps you could take a moment to consider the benefits of this arrangement. We're simply trying to protect you, ensure that your finances are handled in the best way possible." "No," I said, my voice firm, stronger than I felt. "I don't need you to protect me. I've managed my own affairs for years. I'm not going to sign over control to Gregg or anyone else." The air in the room grew heavy. Gregg's smile wavered just slightly, but it was enough to show me that he wasn't in control of the situation anymore. And that was when I knew I needed more than just my own resolve. I needed backup. I picked up my phone and called Daniel. "Daniel, I need you here now. Franco's Restaurant, Meridian Street. You won't believe what they're doing. It's bad." I could hear the urgency in my voice, and I knew he could hear it too. He didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had always known that my son would have my back. He had always been the level-headed one, the one who saw through the noise, the one who could assess a situation in seconds and act accordingly. I didn't want to drag him into this, but I also knew that this wasn't a fight I could handle on my own. As I hung up, I looked at the three men who were now staring at me, waiting for me to back down. I refused. I wasn't going to let them bully me into submission. The minutes dragged on. Every tick of the clock seemed like an eternity. I focused on the sound of the jazz music playing softly in the background and tried to steady my breathing. I could feel the heat in my chest, the anger, the betrayal, the sheer injustice of it all. And then, just as the silence became unbearable, I saw him. Daniel. He walked in with the confidence that only someone who had spent years in a hospital ER could possess, calm, collected yet, with an intensity that made everyone else in the room take notice. He didn't say a word to anyone, but walked straight to my side, pulling out the chair and sitting down next to me. His gaze swept the table, taking in the three men in suits, the folders, the air of tension that had filled the room. He didn't need to ask what was going on. He could read the situation just as easily as he could read a patient's chart. Gregg Daniel said, his tone even, but laced with authority, "What's going on here?" Gregg shifted in his seat, trying to maintain his calm, but I could see the tension in his posture. "We're just having a conversation, Daniel. Nothing to worry about." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because it looks like you're trying to pressure my mother into signing over control of her finances. Is that right?" Gregg hesitated, his eyes flicking to Richard, as if searching for some kind of reassurance, but Richard was silent. I could feel the weight of the moment. This was it, the confrontation that had been building ever since that fateful argument with Emma. But now with Daniel here, I wasn't alone. I had someone who could stand with me, who could fight this battle with me. Daniel's presence alone was enough to unsettle Gregg. The sharpness of Daniel's eyes, the way he assessed the situation with a professional gaze, made it clear that he was not someone to be intimidated. "Mom, I've been doing some research." Daniel continued, his voice steady and calm. "I know about the private investigator Gregg hired." At that, Gregg's expression faltered. It was subtle, but I saw it, a crack in his facade. Richard's eyes widened in surprise, but he quickly masked it. "What do you mean, research?" Gregg asked, his voice losing some of its earlier confidence. "You didn't think we'd find out?" Daniel shot back, his gaze sharp. I know about the investigator you hired to dig into my mother's finances. You even got someone to check her medical records, didn't you?" The room grew still. I watched as Greg's face tightened, his jaw clenching. He tried to keep his composure, but I could see it slipping. Daniel wasn't just confronting him, he was exposing him, and it felt damn good. "You've been gathering information on her on everything she owns. You've been planning this for months." Daniel continued, his voice growing colder with every word. "You thought she wouldn't notice, that she wouldn't catch on." Greg glanced at Richard, but even the lawyer seemed to have lost his confidence. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, trying to regroup, but it was too late. The truth was already out. "I know what you've been doing," Daniel said, leaning forward slightly, his voice full of quiet power. "And it stops here. You will not take advantage of my mother. Not while I'm here." Emma had remained silent through all of this. She hadn't said a word since Daniel arrived, but I could see her face contorting with discomfort. She was realizing that everything she had believed and everything she had been convinced of was unraveling before her eyes. "Emma," I said, my voice finally breaking through the tension, "why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you stop him? This isn't about the wedding anymore. This is about control, about manipulation. I thought you wanted what was best for me, for our family. But now I see that you've been willing to sacrifice everything for this man." She didn't look at me. She couldn't. Her gaze was fixed on the table, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. Daniel's presence was a shield. He stood between me and them, protecting me from their manipulations, offering me a kind of emotional and legal fortitude I didn't even know I needed. He turned to Richard, who was now looking just as uncomfortable as Greg, the lawyer's professional demeanor finally cracking. "I suggest we all take a step back," Daniel said, his voice firm. "You have two choices. Either walk away now and leave my mother alone, or we'll take this further legally. I've already started the process of gathering evidence on what you've been doing. Do you really want to go down this path?" The room was silent for a moment, the weight of Daniel's words hanging in the air. The tension was unbearable, but in that silence I felt a strange sense of relief. We had fought back. We had stood our ground. Greg and the lawyers exchanged one last glance before Richard slowly began gathering his papers. "This isn't over, Mrs. McKinney," he said, his voice barely a whisper as he stood to leave. "Yes, it is," I replied, my voice full of finality. "It ends tonight." As they left, I looked at Daniel, who was now sitting beside me, his hand resting lightly on mine. "Thank you," I whispered. He smiled, squeezing my hand. "You don't have to thank me, Mom. I'm just doing what you taught me, and I'm not going to let anyone take advantage of you." And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I was no longer alone in this fight. With Daniel by my side, we were stronger. And whatever came next, I knew we would face it together. As the door to Franco's swung shut behind Greg and his team of lawyers, the weight of what had just transpired settled over me like a heavy fog. I had been pushed to my breaking point, but in that moment, something shifted within me. I wasn't broken. I was resolute. I had faced down the manipulations of Greg and Emma. But more than that, I had taken back control of my life. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity, of power returning to me. Daniel remained by my side, his presence a solid anchor. I could feel the strength in his calm, the way he didn't just step in to protect me. He had helped me find my voice again. His support had been more than just emotional. It was strategic, it was grounded in truth, and it was exactly what I needed. I wasn't alone anymore. I had my son beside me, and for once I knew I was going to be okay. I took a deep breath, finally exhaling the tension that had been constricting my chest all evening. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from Rebecca, my lawyer. I had been meaning to reach out to her earlier, but the situation had escalated so quickly that I hadn't had the chance. Now I needed her expertise more than ever. "Rebecca, it's Sarah McKinney." I typed, my fingers shaking slightly as I typed out the message. I need you here, right now. It's urgent. The moment I hit send, I felt a small sense of relief. I had trusted Rebecca for years. She was not only a good lawyer, but she was also someone who understood the gravity of family dynamics. She knew that Emma and Greg were not just trying to take my money, they were trying to break me to weaken my autonomy. But I wouldn't let that happen. It wasn't long before Rebecca arrived. She entered the restaurant with the same quiet confidence that had always calmed my nerves when things felt out of control. She walked straight to our table, her sharp eyes taking in the situation immediately. Sarah, she greeted me with a firm nod, her gaze sweeping over the table, taking in the remnants of the confrontation that had just unfolded. I got your message. What's going on? I filled her in quickly, recounting the events of the evening, the arrival of Greg and his lawyers, their demands, and the power of attorney document they had tried to shove in my face. Rebecca listened without interruption, her expression serious, but not without the glimmer of reassurance I needed. When I finished, she nodded, once her lips curling into a small, knowing smile. You've done the right thing by refusing to sign anything on Sarah. She said, her voice steady. Greg and his team are trying to manipulate you, but they're not going to win this one. We've got the legal framework to protect you. I felt a small wave of relief wash over me, but I wasn't quite ready to exhale completely. Rebecca reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. You remember the irrevocable trust we set up a few weeks ago? She asked. I nodded. Well, it's going to protect everything you hold dear, your assets, your house, your investments. No matter what Greg and Emma try to do, they have no legal right to your financial control. I felt a wave of gratitude for Rebecca's thoroughness, but also a sense of pride in what I had done. I hadn't been naive. I had been strategic. I had set up that trust precisely for moments like this. The trust was solid, legally binding, and most importantly, it could not be touched without my explicit permission. Rebecca continued reinforcing the strength of the trust and the legal protection it provided. Greg's power of attorney is meaningless, she said. It's invalid because of the trust you've set up. And even if they try to bring it to court, we have the upper hand. You've taken the necessary precautions. They don't have a leg to stand on. That's when it hit me I had won. Greg, the man who had tried to manipulate me to take what didn't belong to him, was now on the losing side. He had thought he could outsmart me, that he could use my vulnerabilities against me, but he hadn't accounted for my foresight, for the steps I had taken to protect myself. I looked at Daniel, who was now sitting quietly beside me, his arm resting casually on the back of my chair. His expression mirrored my own thoughts, relief mixed with quiet satisfaction. Together we had exposed Greg's schemes and ensured that my life, my future, would remain under my control. As Rebecca stood up to make a quick phone call, I noticed Emma sitting quietly across the room. Her face was pale, her eyes downcast. She didn't meet my gaze, and for a moment I wondered if she was beginning to see what she had become. Was she realizing that the love she had once cherished in me was not something to be manipulated for her own gain? Was she finally understanding the depth of her actions, the cost of her betrayal? I shook my head, trying to banish the thought. I couldn't force Emma to change. She would have to come to terms with her own choices, just as I had to come to terms with mine. As the dinner came to a close, Rebecca left the table with a final promise to handle any further legal ramifications. Greg and his lawyers had already begun gathering their things, their departure as swift as their arrival. But not before I saw Greg glance at me, his expression hard, the facade of confidence slipping. He knew it was over. The game he had been playing had failed. Emma stood to leave with them, her body language stiff, almost robotic. I watched her walk toward the door, her back straight, but her shoulders slumped as though weighed down by something heavier than just her dress. Her disappointment was palpable. She had hoped I could tell that I would cave, that I would give in to her demands. But I hadn't. Mom, I just... Emma's voice broke through the stillness, barely above a whisper. I turned to face her, but I didn't rise from my seat. She stood there for a moment, her words hanging in the air, unsure of how to proceed. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the same eyes I had spent years looking into. But I couldn't fix it. Not tonight, and not on my terms. "I've made my decision, Emma," I said softly but firmly. "This isn't about you or Greg. This is about me taking control of my life again. I'm sorry, but I can't keep pretending I don't see what's happening." She didn't respond. She just turned and walked out with Greg, and the lawyers leaving me with the emptiness that always followed a loss. And yet I felt lighter, stronger somehow. It wasn't just that I had won a battle, I had won something far more valuable. I had won back my sense of self, my power, and my peace. For the first time in what felt like years, I was no longer living in the shadow of someone else's expectations. I was living for myself. The next day I spent some time thinking about what the future held. My journey was far from over, but for the first time I knew that I could face whatever came next. No one would take my autonomy from me again. Not Emma, not Greg, not anyone. And I was ready to move forward stronger and more in control of my own destiny than ever before. I had reclaimed my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The days after the confrontation with Greg and Emma felt strangely quiet, almost peaceful. The storm had passed, and though the damage to my relationship with Emma was still raw, I felt something in me shift. It was as if for the first time in years I was no longer just drifting through life. I had control again. My decisions, my boundaries, my future, these were all mine to shape. The first few days after the dinner with Greg and his lawyers were a blur of emotions, but there was a clarity beneath it all that I hadn't experienced in a long time. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. I could feel the weight lifting slowly but surely. My heart was still heavy with the disappointment of what had happened with Emma, but it wasn't crushing me the way it had before. I was beginning to rebuild piece by piece, and for the first time it didn't feel like I was just trying to fill the gaps. It felt like I was forging something new. I knew I had to take steps to ensure that this newfound sense of empowerment didn't fade away. It wasn't enough to simply sit back and hope things would get better on their own. I had to be proactive. I needed to build something for myself, something that had nothing to do with Emma or Greg or anyone else. That's when I decided to look into support groups for seniors who had faced financial exploitation. It was something I hadn't considered before, but it made sense. I wasn't the only one who had fallen victim to manipulation and deceit. There were others out there who had experienced the same kinds of betrayals, the same kinds of losses. And I wanted to connect with them, share my story, and learn from theirs. The first meeting I attended was in a small community center on the edge of town. It was a modest space, with folding chairs arranged in a circle, a few tables stacked with pamphlets and brochures, and a warm, inviting atmosphere that immediately made me feel at ease. I remember walking in and feeling like I didn't belong at first. I had spent so much time trying to protect myself to shield myself from further hurt that the idea of opening up to strangers was daunting. But as soon as I sat down and looked around the room, I felt a shift. These people, older women and men, some with faces lined with years of struggle, others with smiles that hinted at hope, understood. They had lived through their own versions of what I was going through. They knew the weight of betrayal, the pain of being taken advantage of, and the exhaustion of trying to hold everything together when the ground beneath you was shaking. I listened as one of the facilitators, a woman named Janet, spoke about her own experience. She had been financially exploited by her adult children who had convinced her to sell her house so they could have access to her equity. Her voice was steady, but there was a sharpness in her words that reflected both the pain and the power she had gained from her experience. "I thought I had raised them better," she said, her voice softening for a moment. But when it came down to it, they just saw me as a resource. They didn't see me as their mother anymore. They saw me as a way to get what they wanted. Her story resonated deeply with me. I had felt the same way when Emma had demanded money for the wedding, when she had tried to manipulate me into signing over control of my assets. I had been the one who had always been there for her, the one who had put her needs above my own. But in the end, I had become nothing more than a means to an end. And that realization, though painful, had been the first step in reclaiming my life. As the meeting continued, I shared my own story. At first, it felt strange to speak openly about what had happened with Emma. I wasn't used to showing that kind of vulnerability, especially not to strangers. But as I spoke, I felt the weight of the words lift off my shoulders. I could see the others nodding and understanding their faces, soft with empathy. They weren't judging me. They were with me. By the end of the meeting, I felt a sense of connection I hadn't expected. There was something powerful about being surrounded by people who had walked through the same fire, who understood the complexities of family relationships and the toll that financial exploitation could take on someone's spirit. But more than that, I felt empowered. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't just a victim of my circumstances. I was someone who had something to offer, who could help others in the same way that they had helped me. Over the next few weeks, I continued to attend the support group. Each meeting brought new insights, new perspectives, and a growing sense of camaraderie. I started to hear stories of recovery of people who had managed to rebuild their lives after being exploited by their families. It was heartening, but it also made me realize that healing wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a process, a journey that required patience, self-compassion, and a willingness to let go of the past. I also began to take more active steps in reclaiming my life outside of the group. I took up activities that I had put off for years, things that had once brought me joy, but had been pushed aside in the chaos of raising children and managing a household. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since Harold passed away. The strokes of color on the canvas felt like an expression of freedom of creativity that had been dormant for far too long. I also reconnected with old friends, people I had lost touch with over the years, people who had known me before the weight of family obligations had consumed my every thought. It was like rediscovering a part of myself that I had buried beneath the role of being a mother, a wife, a caretaker. These friends reminded me of who I was before everything had changed, before Emma had made her demands, before Greg had manipulated me, before I had allowed myself to lose sight of my own needs. Despite the hurt that Emma had caused, I began to see the situation with more clarity. I wasn't angry at her anymore, at least not in the way I had been. I had come to terms with the fact that she had made her choices, and I had made mine. I couldn't change her, but I could change how I responded to her. I had learned that I didn't need to be held hostage by her actions or her expectations. It wasn't easy, but I began to set clearer boundaries. I reached out to Emma once through a letter offering her a chance at reconciliation, but on my terms. I was willing to have a relationship with her, but it had to be based on respect, honesty, and mutual understanding. I couldn't keep enabling her, couldn't keep allowing her to manipulate me for her own gain. It was hard. It was painful. But I had learned that healing required boundaries, and sometimes it meant protecting yourself from the very people you loved the most. As the months went by, I felt a growing sense of purpose. The support group, the activities I had taken up, the renewed friendships, these were all pieces of a larger puzzle. I was rebuilding my life on my own terms, not defined by the expectations of others, but by the choices I made for myself. One evening, I found myself sitting on the porch of my duplex, a cup of tea in my hand, watching the sunset. The sky was streaked with shades of pink and orange, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a quiet peace. I had come so far. I had fought to take back my life, and I was stronger for it. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain: it would be mine to shape. And as I sat there feeling the cool evening air on my face, I smiled, because for the first time in years, I felt free. A few weeks had passed since that unforgettable dinner with Greg and his lawyers, the one where everything had changed. In that time, I had worked hard to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I focused on my personal growth, on the relationships that truly mattered, and on reclaiming the things I had once lost: my sense of self, my independence, and my voice. I was still carrying the weight of what had happened with Emma, but I had grown stronger, learning to navigate the pain with a newfound clarity. Then one afternoon, as I was sitting in my living room sipping tea, my phone rang. It was from Michael. "Mom," he said, his voice steady, but with an undercurrent of concern, "I just wanted to let you know, Emma's had the baby." I sat up straight, the words sending a ripple of emotions through me. Emma? My daughter? A baby? My granddaughter? A part of me felt a surge of warmth at the thought of a new life, a new chapter in our family, but there was also a sharp edge of hesitation. What did this mean for me? What did this mean for Emma and me? Could this be an opportunity for reconciliation? Or was it yet another attempt to manipulate me, to use the baby as leverage in some way? "She's named her Olivia," Michael continued, and for a brief moment I could hear the softness in his voice, a softness that he reserved only for family matters, a hint of the love he still had for his sister, despite everything that had transpired. Olivia. I repeated the name softly to myself, trying to picture this little girl, this granddaughter I had never met. It felt surreal. "I'm sure she'll want you to meet her mom," Michael said, his voice gentle but insistent. "She's been asking about you. She wants to make things right, wants to reconnect." I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of what he was saying. Emma wanted to reconnect. The same daughter who had tried to manipulate me into signing over my assets, the one who had accused me of being selfish, the one who had threatened to cut me out of Olivia's life. It was hard to reconcile the woman I had seen in those moments with the one who was now reaching out, asking for forgiveness. I sighed deeply, the emotions swirling inside me. I wanted to meet Olivia. Of course I did. I wanted to hold her in my arms, to love her, to be a grandmother in the way I had always dreamed of. But I also knew that I couldn't let the mistakes of the past be swept under the rug. I couldn't just forgive and forget. Not after everything that had happened. Over the next few days, Emma reached out to me several times, her voice softer, more apologetic than I had heard in months. She wanted to meet. She wanted to talk. But with every message, every phone call, the same question lingered in the back of my mind. What did she really want? Was she genuinely trying to rebuild our relationship? Or was this just another attempt to get something from me, to use the baby as a bargaining chip? I had learned the hard way to trust my instincts, and right now my instincts were telling me to proceed with caution. I knew that meeting Olivia would be a significant step, but it had to be on my terms. It had to be about family, not money. It had to be about rebuilding the relationship with Emma without opening the door to manipulation or deceit. I decided that the best way forward was to put everything in writing. I needed to be clear about my boundaries, about what I was willing to accept and what I wasn't. Emma needed to understand that I would not be manipulated again. She needed to know that if she wanted to reconnect with me, it had to be based on mutual respect and honesty. I sat down at my desk, pen in hand, and began writing a letter to Emma. The words came slowly at first, but as I wrote, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. This was the right decision. I couldn't be passive anymore. I needed to take control of the situation, just as I had done before. Dear Emma, I've been thinking a lot about you and Olivia. The news of her birth brought up so many emotions: joy, love, and yes, even some apprehension. It's been a long time since we've spoken, and the events that have unfolded between us weigh heavily on my heart. I've spent these past months trying to make sense of everything, trying to heal from the pain that was caused by your actions and the choices you made. You have to understand that what happened wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about respect, and about boundaries. I felt betrayed, manipulated, and taken advantage of. That hurt more than anything, and it's something I'm still working through. But I also want you to know that despite everything, I want to be a part of Olivia's life. She's your daughter, and that means she's my granddaughter. I can't imagine the joy you must feel as a mother, and I want to share in that joy with you. However, this can only happen if we rebuild our relationship on solid ground. It has to be based on mutual respect, trust, and understanding. I'm willing to meet Olivia, but I need to be clear about my boundaries. I will not discuss the trust, the money, or the past grievances. This meeting is about family, not finances. If you can accept that, if you can accept that I am not the same person I was before, and that I will no longer be manipulated, I'm open to seeing you and Olivia. But this has to be on my terms. If you can't respect those boundaries, then I need to be clear that I won't be involved in any way. I can't keep sacrificing my well-being for a relationship that isn't built on respect. I hope you understand, Emma. This isn't easy for me, but it's the only way forward. I want to be a grandmother to Olivia, but I also want to protect myself from further harm. I'm offering you a chance at reconciliation, but it's up to you to prove that this time things will be different. Please take the time you need to think this over. I'm not rushing you. I'm just asking that you come to me with honesty and respect. With love, Mom. When I finished the letter, I sealed it in an envelope, my hand trembling slightly. I didn't know what Emma's response would be, or if she would even agree to the terms I had set. But I had to stand firm. I couldn't let myself fall into the same patterns again. The next day, I handed the letter to Michael, asking him to deliver it to Emma. I knew that for now, that was the only way to ensure she received it without it being twisted or manipulated in some way. I had no idea what her response would be, but I was prepared for whatever came next. I had set my boundaries, and I would stick to them. As the days passed, I found myself thinking more and more about Olivia. I wondered what she looked like, what her laugh sounded like, whether she had Emma's dark hair or Harold's blue eyes. There was so much I didn't know about her, so much I was missing, but I couldn't let my desire to be close to my granddaughter cloud the importance of setting boundaries. I had to protect myself for both my sake and for Olivia's. A week later, I received a message from Michael. It was brief. Emma agrees to meet, but she wants to do it on your terms. She understands now what you need from her. I felt a mixture of relief and skepticism. This wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a step forward. I knew that this was only the beginning. There would be more conversations, more healing, and a long road ahead. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. Emma was willing to meet me halfway, and that was more than I had expected. When the day arrived, I was nervous. But as I walked into the room where we would meet, I knew I was making the right choice. I was doing it on my terms, and that made all the difference. I had no illusions that everything would be perfect from here on out. But I was ready to face whatever came next with clarity, with strength, and with a heart that, despite everything, was still open to love. As I sat quietly in my living room, the weight of the past few months finally began to lift. The tension that had been tightly wound inside me, the constant fear of being manipulated or taken advantage of, had started to unravel. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a deep sense of freedom, freedom from the emotional chains that had bound me to a past of manipulation and betrayal. I had reclaimed my life. I had taken back control, and no one could take that from me. It wasn't just about the decisions I had made regarding Emma Gregg and the rest of my family. It was about something deeper, something far more personal. I had found my voice again. I had stood up for myself in ways I never thought I could, and in doing so, I had not only protected my financial future, but also my emotional well-being. I had learned that love doesn't have to come with strings attached, and that true respect and connection can only exist when there are clear boundaries. While I remained open to the possibility of rebuilding relationships, I knew now that I would never allow myself to be manipulated again. The lesson had been hard won, but it was a lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my life. I knew that any future relationships, whether with Emma or anyone else, would have to be grounded in honesty, mutual respect, and a shared understanding of each other's needs. No more pretending. No more allowing others to cross lines that should never have been crossed. As the days passed, I slowly let go of the anger and the hurt that had lingered for so long. I had written my letter to Emma, setting my boundaries and offering a path to reconciliation, but the real work was done within me. I had come to terms with the fact that I couldn't change what had happened. I couldn't change Emma's choices or Greg's manipulations, but I could change how I responded. And that was empowering. I looked forward to the future with a sense of peace. I had decided that I would love my granddaughter Olivia, but only on my own terms, with a heart that was free from the manipulation of the past. I could be the grandmother I had always wanted to be, offering love and wisdom without sacrificing my own well-being. I had found peace in my decisions, knowing that the future would be mine to shape, and I would shape it with the strength and clarity I had fought so hard to find. What Sarah's journey illustrates is something many of us can relate to: the importance of reclaiming control over our lives, especially when we've been made to feel small or taken advantage of by the very people we love. It's a powerful reminder that self-respect and personal boundaries are not just important, they are necessary for our well-being. We all face situations where manipulation or betrayal can leave us questioning our self-worth. But just like Sarah, we can choose to rise above it. We have the power to stand firm, protect our peace, and decide who gets a place in our lives. Sarah's decision to set boundaries, to say no when it matters most, isn't just a personal victory, it's an act of courage that many of us need to take in our own lives. Whether it's a toxic relationship, an emotionally draining job, or a family dynamic that constantly demands more than we're willing to give, it's important to recognize when we've been pushed too far. We don't need to be anyone's pawn. We don't need to sacrifice our happiness for the sake of others' expectations. And we certainly don't need to allow anyone to manipulate our love. As you watch Sarah take back her life, ask yourself, are you protecting your peace? Are you allowing others to cross your boundaries? What steps can you take today to stand firm just like Sarah did? If this story resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I really enjoy reading what you all think, and if you feel inspired, be sure to check out more videos that dive into personal empowerment and how to navigate difficult relationships. You won't want to miss what's coming next.